This is an innocent woman. She didn't do it.
I tried to save his life.
Yeah.
We know who did it, Steve. We know. And we know who spearheaded this cover-up. You all know.
The idea that multiple police department, the medical examiner, and prosecuting agencies join in or taken in by a vast conspiracy should be seen for what it is, a desperate attempt to reassign guilt.
So who killed Officer John O'Keefe? Well, Karen Reed's defense team went from we know who did it to we don't know. So we're asking how each side will handle Reed's conflicting statements at her retrial. Plus, a Green Beret is found dead and dismembered after trying to leave his wife. So how now will she defend herself against this murder charge? Plus, the forensic shoe waiting to drop in the death of Crystal Rogers. We're talking about how DNA testing on 2 mystery hairs could change her case. Also this hour, we're bringing you the sentencing of Tracy Nix, guilty of leaving her granddaughter in a hot car. And we're expecting a very emotional morning in court. It's all coming up next for you right here on Opening Statements. Good Thursday morning to you, or should I say happy Friday Eve, my friends. Welcome to Opening Statements. I'm Julie Grant. We got a great show planned, so let's get it started. Grab that cup of coffee or wherever you want to drink right now in the morning or afternoon, depending on where you're watching from. It's time for my Opening Statement. Jail is an unpleasant place. The man suspected of murdering Mia Campos and committing statutory rape when impregnating her once out of jail. Well, there's a shocking surprise. But you know what's more unpleasant than jail? Burying your beautiful 16-year-old daughter in her unborn baby boy. Imagine the heartbreak and the agony the Campos family has been forced to endure. On Wednesday, Jesus Monroy went before a new judge because he picked up that new charge of statutory rape. And the judge said she'll likely issue a ruling in 24 to 48 hours on his bond. What's there to think about? This guy now has 2 sets of felonious allegations. The facts, according to police, show that he lured Mia Campos from her home under false pretenses of going out to get a bite to eat before police say he strangled her to death and left her body in the woods. Keep him locked up. Those allegations tell me that this guy has the potential to be a danger to the community. Why should we allow him to sit at home on his couch and run the risk that somebody else gets hurt if he did what police say he did? You know, my friends, one day I hope to be a magistrate judge. I really do. And I hope to handle cases like this one. And I tell you what, this would be an easy decision for me. I would tell Mr. Monroy to go get comfortable. You're staying where we can keep an eye on you until your trial begins. And as this case progresses, let's continue sending love, light, and prayers for the Campos family for their loss. May their beautiful daughter Mia and her unborn baby Sebastian get the justice that they deserve. That's my opening statement. Let me know if you like it right now. It's time for your daily docket.
Did you observe any, did you smell anything at that point?
I smell an odor of accelerant gasoline.
How close were you to the body then when you smelled that?
Within, I'd say 6 to 8 inches. I was right there.
In Michigan, trial for Linda Sturmer rolls on today. Court's going to resume at 9 a.m. Eastern. In California, closing arguments in the trial for Monica Sementilli. They start up at noon. And in Florida, we've got sentencing for Tracy Nix set for 8:30 a.m. Eastern time. If you remember her, she was acquitted of the crime of manslaughter in the hot car death of her 7-month-old granddaughter, Uriel. But she was convicted on a lesser charge. So we're going to take you there live once court is underway. Now, to our top story. We're getting closer and closer to a jury being seated in the retrial for defendant Karen Reed. Jury selection resumes this morning, and so far we've got a total of 7 jurors that have been picked to hear the case. 4 men, 3 women. The goal of the court is to get 16 to 18 jurors total. Now, as we're waiting for the process to be completed, we want to take a look at some key statements made between Reed's first trial and now. As we know, she's accused of hitting and killing her Boston police officer boyfriend, John O'Keefe, with her SUV in a drunken rage and leaving him to die in the snow. She and her defense team contend that someone else is responsible. They say it's a frame job, and they're trying to put forth a third-party culprit defense to point the finger at somebody else. Now, Karen Reed and her team have made multiple conflicting statements about who the third party or parties really are.
It feels we're the only ones fighting for the truth of what happened to John O'Keefe. And me and my family and my attorneys and my team have marshaled every resource to get to the truth. Just feels like no one else wants it.
Karen, just to be clear, you didn't do it.
We know who did it, Steve. We know. And we know who spearheaded this cover-up. You all know.
Yes, we do. If John was beaten up and attacked in that house, who did it?
We don't know.
We don't know.
We don't know. And it's not for us to know. Somebody other than Karen is responsible for that, for the killing of John.
We're solely seeking to introduce the crux of a third-party culprit defense, which is evidence of motive, opportunity, and means, all of which Brian Higgins, and Colin Albert had.
All right, let's talk about these contradictions and how both sides are going to have to handle them. I have two sensational trial attorneys on the program this morning. Let me welcome them in. Joe Krowski, who practices in Boston, and Mario Gallucci. Good morning to you both. Two defense heavy hitters now. You both were prosecutors way back when, too. So I'm going to ask one of you to look at this from the prosecutor side, the other from the defense side. So, Joe, help me out from the state's side here. How do they need to handle these contradictions that are so blatant?
Well, it's not a matter of handling them, right? It's now the ability and the opportunity to make use out of them. Karen Reed has a sacrosanct right to remain silent, and she chose voluntarily as part of what, in my mind, is an ill-conceived pretrial strategy to taint the jury pool, to make different statements. The problem is, when you make statements, you better make sure that they are thought out and that they are consistent and that they are plausible. It's just the opposite of what we've seen. A lot of her statements have been replete with contradictions, and probably most compelling and of most use to the prosecution is they've been admissions. So I think they've actually gifted these statements to the prosecution that it's just a treasure trove of information that they're going to make use of at trial.
Joe, well said. Mario, help me out. On the defense side, how do they manage this?
So Joe's right. You know, she did not testify at the first trial, so it gave the ability for the defense in the second trial to basically put whatever defense they would like forward. But in the same vein, you know, letting her go out and make all these admissions and statements now prevents you from maybe putting her on the stand this time. And what is the proof that you have that any of this happened? I think they opened up a cornucopia of evidence that they'll be allowed to use at this trial, and I don't think it was helpful at all.
Right. I am in agreement with you, Mario. We have a couple more clips I want to show you both of some contradictions, and this going to the ultimate issue, you know, whether she hit John O'Keefe. Let's take a look.
During your first discussions with Karen, did she believe she may have hit John?
No. No. She felt she struck something. She said, "Dad, I think I struck something." I said, "What do you mean?" All right, this was in the hospital. Right? She says, "I remember, all right, backing up and hitting something."
So did you drive your car into John?
I did not drive my car into John. Didn't reverse it. Did not hit John with my car.
Is there any chance this was an accident?
There is zero chance this was an accident.
All right, Joe Krowski, back to you on this. We got Dad in the mix now as part of these contradictions. Your thoughts?
So look, this is what I was talking about. Those statements are going to be devastating to the defense. First, her father admitted that Karen acknowledged that she hit something. Now, the defense, I'm sure, is going to try to spin that she was referring to backing into John's Traverse at Meadows Lane. Unfortunately, even the ARCA experts called by the defense conceded that that low impact backing into the traverse could not have caused the damage to the taillight. And I also noticed in pretrial motions leading up to that the Commonwealth has retooled their prosecution and is set to present expert testimony that the two cars didn't line up, so that wasn't the cause of the damage to the taillight. Also, the statement that she didn't put the car into reverse is belied by the event data recorder. Now, look, witness testimony is fraught with contradictions and human frailties, but event data recorder is pretty solid evidence. So it's another example where Karen Reed either contradicts herself or contradicts the forensic evidence. Neither one is helpful.
You're right, Joe. And as you and Mario both know, there have been so many contradictions that she's put out into the public realm. We just don't have enough time in this segment to play them all. Mario Gallucci, what I want to ask you, please, looking at this from the defense perspective, I'm so curious. If you were trying this case and representing Karen Reed, what defense would you go with for her?
That she didn't do it, obviously. I thought the first defense worked brilliantly. I thought they did a very good job with, making believe or doing whatever they did to say that it wasn't her that did it, that there was proof that showed that he could have been beat up. We had the dog marks on the arm. So I thought that defense worked very well. She got the retrial. They brought in a juror, although she was an alternate juror, onto the team. And, making her make all of these statements to the public is just not what I would have, not the way I would have done it. I would have had to keep quiet, let your lawyer talk, let the lawyer do what he does best.
Right, Mario, exactly. And backing up even further, I think something that's a little known fact was that initially, at the very outset, before Karen Reed had 5 other attorneys, when she just had David Yannetti at her first hearing, Joe Krowski, I'm sure you may recall this, when David Yannetti was asking for bond for her and making arguments, he essentially indicated to the court in so many words that this was an accident, that my client loved her boyfriend, that there was no intent here. He kept saying there was no intent, to hit him, anything like that. I can't remember his exact words, but it was along those lines of accident, a lack of intent. Do you think that she would have been smarter to stick with that theory? Do you think, Joe, could she have possibly avoided, a murder conviction and much of her life in jail if convicted, if she would have gone that route?
Oh, I think so. The implication, right? And David Yannetti, when he was handling the case exclusively, was representing her with a more conventional defense, a defense in my mind that probably would have been more effective. You bring in a Hollywood lawyer and you come up with a Hollywood defense. And my criticism of the defense is third-party culprit is one thing, but it was just too wide and too thin to be plausible and believable, essentially backing the district attorney's office into a corner. I think they made the case into much more than it had to be. I would have tried it conventionally, pointed out deficiencies in the investigation and the evidence collection, and made use of a much more traditional defense. And I think they would have been better served doing that. What David Yannetti did, making that statement on behalf of his client, is the way you can do it. It's the way you can get your story out there, and you can get statements out there from your client without your client waiving his or her Fifth Amendment right to remain silent and not give testimony against herself.
Right, Joe. Yeah, I often think about that because it was a clip that hasn't really been widely shared, but I've seen it, and terrible accidents can happen. And it seemed that was the way David Yannetti wanted to go with this. Now, Joe, if she's convicted of the top count, which is second-degree murder, not first-degree, so for our friends at home, no premeditation is needed here. Joe, is there a mandatory attached with that charge or any of the other ones?
Oh, in Massachusetts, second-degree murder carries a life sentence. The only distinction between first-degree and second-degree is that one is parole eligible between 15 and 25 years. Second-degree murder, for your viewers, does not even require a specific intent to kill. It could require as little as a specific intent to do an act which creates a plain and strong likelihood that grievous bodily injury might result. So yes, the minimum mandatory sentences and the potential penalties are significant. The lesser charge, if you will, is not that much of a lesser charge. The OUI manslaughter still carries a fairly draconian 5-year minimum mandatory state prison sentence in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So there is a lot at stake for the defendant Reed here, clearly.
Wow. And I don't think the penalties are talked about often enough. I think when you really think about realistically what's ahead, Mario, tell me, for Karen Reed, we know that there's been an awful lot of publicity, much of it her own doing, as we know. She's wanted to affect the public opinion. Tell me, at the end of the day, you've seen a lot. Can she get a fair trial?
So it's very, I just tried a high publicity case, as you know, in New Jersey, where, we were swamped on a daily basis by, not only the media, but also, Facebook people who are out there with their own pages. And it gets very difficult to pick a jury, and the judge in that case, and in this case, needs to constantly tell that jury at the end of the day, go home, enjoy your family, do what you normally do not discuss the case, don't read anything. That's very important in these cases to make sure you do that. So the addition of the juror that in the previous trial, Victoria George, was interesting to me because of the publicity surrounding the case. I'm sure that they have vetted her greatly to find out exactly what happened during that first trial. She's going to be a very big instrument in this case if they didn't listen to the rules.
Right, right, Mario. I agree with you. Joe, last word to you, please, because one of the biggest developments pertaining to the third-party culprit ruling from the court is the exclusion of young man Colin Albert, who has been harassed incessantly and baselessly as a result of allegations. And we know he cooperated, was glad to testify in the federal investigation that turned up nothing. They found that the state got the right defendant. Tell me, whatever you can say, I know you represented Colin previously, but your thoughts when you heard the news about him being excluded, Joe?
Well, I thought it was long overdue. I don't think his name should have ever been part of the first trial. It was noticeable by omission that his name wasn't even referenced by the defense in the closing argument. He is a terrific young man that's been through a lot, and I think that Judge Cannoni's ruling, excluding any reference to him as a potential third-party culprit, was in a sense vindication. Now, look, people are still going to say what they're going to say, and there's been a lot of damage done to this young man, but he's a young man of character and fortitude. He really has been exploited and victimized, but he's going to survive. He's doing well.
He sure is. He's got the ability to file a lawsuit now. I'm watching for that to happen, as you know. We have to leave it here for now. Mario, you were able to come with us. We thank you for that. Joe Krauske, we have to let you get off to court. Thank you so much, and we'll see you soon. Still to come here on Opening Statements.
I'm working very hard on bringing justice for my daughter, and I feel this whole town that I live in wants justice just like me. And it is coming. It is going to happen.
New DNA is being tested in Crystal Rogers' murder case 10 years after she went missing. But first, a Green Beret allegedly murdered by his wife when he was trying to leave her. Now, we've got his girlfriend speaking out.
Before next week's season premiere of Interview with a Killer, relive the most shocking moments of season 1.
Tell me, why are you here?
She needed payback for what she did.
You meet someone that make you angry and you shoot them.
Are you not prepared today to take responsibility for any of your crimes?
Interview with a Killer Marathon, Sunday at 7. And season 2 starts Sunday, April 13th, only on Court TV.
Count.
Welcome back. And now for what's trending in true crime. The wife of an Army Special Forces officer is charged with his murder. But it's what the victim's girlfriend is saying now that's trending this morning. So the suspect and the estranged wife, Shayna Cloud, was arrested on Friday and charged with first-degree murder after investigators say that she shot and killed her husband, Clint Bonnell. Now, Bonnell, who is a retired Green Beret, was found 3 miles from their home in a rural pond. Now, this was nearly a month after he was reported missing. But now, Bonnell's girlfriend is speaking out, telling ABC News about the separate lives that he and Ms. Cloud were living.
I know that they were coming to an end. And, the last couple of weeks, 5 or 6 weeks, things were really shifting. There were some concerns, for sure. And obviously, no one understood the severity of those concerns.
Now, police say that Bonnell was in the process of filing for divorce, and they think that that might have been the motivation behind his murder. We're asking this morning, should investigators be looking at anybody else besides Shayna Cloud? Let's talk about it. Still with me, Mario Gallucci, and want to welcome in high-profile attorney John Phillips. Good morning to you, John. Let me start with you. Your thoughts on this? Should they be looking elsewhere?
You gotta start with the window really wide open as a prosecutor, as Cumberland County Sheriff's Office in North Carolina, and try to figure out where things went wrong. And it leads to the girlfriend who was making welfare checks or asking for welfare checks, and it leads to the wife, and it leads to this messy divorce. And look who's talking, right? So they've kind of triangulated the situation. They've gotten other evidence to corroborate their suspect. They found other evidence to show that she was in the area. You expect her to try to point the fingers, or a defense team to point the fingers at somebody else. But I right now, everything's pointing to Shayna Cloud.
Right. You're right, John. You're right. Mario Gallucci, same question to you, please. Should they be looking elsewhere?
Well, as a defense attorney, you're always looking elsewhere. But in this case, I would say I would use what I call the Dexter defense. The body was found dismembered 3 miles away in a pond. That is not something that a woman can easily do to a Green Beret. So the allegation is that not only did she kill him, but she dismembered him and moved him over 3 miles. So it's a Dexter defense. I want to know how they're going to be able to show that she was able to do that. And from what I've read so far, there's been no forensic evidence found at the scene to indicate that that was done. So it's going to be a very interesting trial. Very interesting.
Yeah, you're right, Mario. So there's more coming from Clint Bonnell's girlfriend this morning. Take a listen to what Kelly Edwards told ABC News about how Bonnell appeared the day before he went missing.
He was really exhausted that day. He had been kept up the night before. You could tell he'd been through a lot. He was just a jovial, happy human. And he was really looking forward to his next part of his life, closing a chapter, coming out of the Army after 20 years.
All right, so we have some more details into the investigation, and in particular, why they like Shayna Cloud for the homicide. So she told police she last saw Bonnell on January 27th. He was reported missing on the 28th. Forensic investigation led to police obtaining search warrants for her car, her rental property, and her cell phone. And we also know, as mentioned, that Bonnell was planning to divorce Ms. Cloud. And so finally going to break that tie. Now, Ms. Cloud was denied bond on Monday. She's due back in court for her next hearing on April 17th. And so we're wondering, it's going to be the best defense strategy for her. Mario Gallucci, let me start with you here, please.
So as I explained, this is clearly going to be a Dexter defense. We all know the TV show Dexter, where he plans out a murder and he's able to dismember bodies and to dispose of them. You're asking a jury to believe that this young woman was not only able to take over a retired Green Beret, but then dismember his whole entire body and move him 3 miles. I have seen no forensic evidence. I know that they have warrants for the car. You would expect to see some of his DNA in the car. You may, to dismember a body and move it 3 miles would be very, very difficult for this woman to do by herself without leaving any evidence. And so far, we've seen no evidence of that.
I love what you're saying, Mario. The Dexter defense. I love that. And, you know, by the way, what a small world it is. So M. William Phelps, one of our guests who's been coming on the program recently, we love him. He consulted on the show Dexter. He's a really accomplished author, a true crime writer, and podcaster. So cool stuff with that. John Phillips, I want to share with you this statement that Clint Bonnell's family issued. And this was issued right after his estranged wife was arrested. So take a look. It says, Clint was an incredible human who sacrificed so much for others and dedicated his life to the betterment of this world. All we can do now is pray for swift and just punishment for Shayna Cloud. John, tell me, it makes me think, you know, you do civil work as well as criminal work, makes me think, you know, is there a civil lawsuit that could potentially be brought here depending upon what happens in criminal court?
There certainly is. You know, his family can always sue, you know, her and those involved. And I've watched every episode of Dexter so far too. And Dexter liked his victims to be punished, right? And the gunshot wasn't Dexter's way of killing somebody. And so certainly, it's the dismembering that is particularly hard about this case, but it also would allow her to more easily transport it to a bond. You know, but it's certainly a civil case, as you know, the public and prosecutors and police only give us a little bit of information, and as we sit here and follow this case more, we'll certainly learn more and be able to extrapolate new ideas and theories.
Yeah, isn't that the truth? This one, in the early stages, and you both know, this is going to be very high profile. It's already circulating, making headlines all over. So we're not done, and certainly we're grateful to Clint Bonnell for his service. Mario, John, stand by, please. Go refill your coffee. We're going to hit a break. When we come back, we're talking about Crystal Rogers, one of the biggest cases in the true crime community. She went missing 10 years ago. Her boyfriend currently charged with her murder, and now some hair found in her car is being tested all these years later. Plus,
who can do that? Who can do that? Who does that? Meaning, who can forget that a baby's in a car? Who can do that?
Yeah, remember Forgetful Grandma Tracy Nix? She was found guilty of leaving her granddaughter in a hot car. Well, her sentencing is set to start in minutes. We'll take you there live.
I'm working very hard on bringing justice for my daughter, and it is coming. It is going to happen.
What do you think happened?
I'm shocked. I do not know. I don't need an attorney. I haven't asked for an attorney. I don't need none of that. I'm innocent.
Yep, that's him.
Where's Crystal Rogers?
This morning, we're shining a spotlight on the disappearance of Crystal Rogers. Could a new test help get closer to finding out what really happened to her? The Kentucky mother of 5 disappeared in 2015, never to be seen again. Crystal's car was found abandoned with a flat tire in Bardstown, Kentucky. Her then boyfriend, Brooks Houck, was charged with her murder 8 years after she disappeared. Police also charged Steve Lawson, an employee of Houck's, and his son Joseph in connection to the case. They'll all be standing trial later on this year. Now, Crystal's keys, her phone, and her purse were all found inside of her Chevy Impala, and also inside 2 strands of hair. So now authorities are testing those hairs, and we're wondering what we could possibly learn. We're so pleased to welcome back on the program forensic death investigator, professor, and the host of the Body Bags podcast, Joseph Scott Morgan. Professor Joe, good morning and welcome back. Talk to us, if you would, please, about what you think we can possibly glean from this new testing.
You know, the most important thing, Julie, by the way, thank you, my friend, for having me. The most important thing I think that pops up in this is that they've already said that these 2 hairs do not belong to her. and that's rather intriguing, isn't it? So for me, they've already gone some distance in assessing the hair. And, we can actually, in forensics, we can actually assess the morphology of the hair without using it up to, for lack of a better term, relative to DNA testing. So you can go in and look at hair, and Crystal obviously had probably dyed hair, this blonde hair. We can pick up on that. We can look and see how long it's been since her hair was treated, for instance, relative to the growth of the hair. And we can eliminate perhaps her from this just simply based on morphology. The key here is that any other actors that are involved in her disappearance, particularly those that are outside of her immediate circle, let's say if it's a known associate of one of the other people that was in the car, you would not expect their hair to be in there. And so that's left me very intrigued about this. I've actually covered this case on my podcast, Body Bags, back in May, and as well as not just Crystal, but the death or the murder of her father as well.
Right. I wanted to ask you about that, and it's an excellent episode you did. I listened to it, Joe, and anybody interested in the case should listen to it as well. Tommy Ballard, Crystal's dad, as you know, was her biggest champion and trying to find whomever killed her. And then he's killed, and we still don't have answers with his case, do we?
No, we don't. And, the really horrific part to Tommy's murder is the fact that, you've got a grandson that's going out with his papa to go hunting, all right? And this was actually done with grandson there. Just let that sink in just for a second, how cold-blooded this is. And the other thing is that they were out on his property, and it is, in order to set up a hide, like if you're going to snipe somebody, that would require you to have intimate knowledge of, first off, the path that he might take, heading off into the woods there to go hunt. And you would have to get in there and hide yourself to the point where you're not going to draw attention, and then escape to get out of there without being detected. And for me, that is one of the most chilling elements about this case, that someone would go to these lengths to kill this precious man in front of his grandson is something that, really gives you pause.
Right. You're right. It does, Professor Joe. I keep thinking as we're talking about how there have been so many issues raised in this case that kind of make us think answers are coming, and then we don't hear much. For instance, Brooks Houck, Crystal's boyfriend at the time, has a brother named Nick Houck, who was a police officer. I know you're very familiar. He's no longer a police officer. And during Brooks Houck's arraignment, prosecutors said they were waiting for testing to come back on a firearm that they believe was used to murder Tommy Ballard. And police said they got that gun in a sale from Nick Houck. He was trying to sell that gun and sold it to an undercover agent. We still haven't heard about the testing with that gun. Why do you think that is, Joe?
I'm thinking that maybe the testing, there's a couple of ways you can look at it. Maybe the testing was inconclusive, that the round that they were able to recover from Tommy may have, and this does happen, may have been so deformed that they weren't able to pick up on any kind of rifling in there or anything that could be matched back to that specific weapon. Or, you cagey attorneys out there, they might be holding back some of this data at this point in time. But, we're fast approaching a time for a trial. So I would imagine that test would be something that would, could be found in discovery. The state has to disclose that to the defense counsel. So I don't have a firm answer, but I can tell you those are some of the outcomes I've witnessed over the years.
Right. That's a great educated guess. Professor, tell me, when we think about the case overall, and just there's been so much suspicion for so long, so much speculation, so much interest, do you think that these investigators are on the right track with who they've got behind bars right now?
Yeah, I do. I think they do. And the fact that Crystal has never been found, I think that she has been buried somewhere by someone that had use and access to heavy equipment, concrete, those sorts of things, in order to just essentially make her disappear.
Seems like what's happened physically, she has disappeared, but as you know, Joey, and you've are such a beloved member of the true crime community, we want to keep her name alive, her memory alive.
Yes, we do.
And we hope that she and her family get the justice they deserve. Professor Joseph Scott Morgan, you need to go see your students at Jacksonville State University this morning. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Julie.
We'll look forward to having you back soon. Bye-bye.
Yes, ma'am.
Still to come here on Opening Statements, we're going to Florida. Live look at the courtroom right now as we head to break. We're getting ready for defendant Tracy Nix to be sentenced. She's that hot car grandma, right? She's the one who forgot that her granddaughter was in a hot car at her house, and sadly the child died. We're going to see what the judge does with her in a couple of minutes.
Lori Daybell.
Already convicted for the murders of her children.
Doomsday Cult mom is now lawyer Lori.
She's representing herself.
On charges of conspiring to murder her fourth husband.
She said, I can murder you now.
She really thinks she's equipped to try this case.
She appears very sure of herself.
I have real trial experience.
It's going to be a strange trial. We'll see how it plays out.
The Cult Mom Conspiracy Trial. Live coverage begins Monday morning, only on Court TV.
Now, for what's tipping the scales of justice in just a few minutes, a grandmother convicted in the hot car death of her grandchild will be sentenced. I want to show you a live look at the courtroom right now. Tracy Nix left her 7-month-old granddaughter, Uriel, in her car for hours. She was found guilty of one count of leaving a child unattended in a vehicle for more than 15 minutes. But what the jury didn't know was that there was another grandchild that also died in Nix's care when her grandson, Ezra, wandered away and drowned in a pond the year before. Scripps News Tampa sat down with the children's mother before Nix's trial.
Where is your mindset at this moment?
I think overwhelmed would be probably the very best word I would have. And no matter where this goes, this is not going to be a win for me. This is a lose, lose, lose for me.
2 of Kayla's children died under her mother Tracy's care.
And they were taken by somebody that we believed was worthy of trust.
We first met with Kayla and her now husband Drew in the spring of 2023, 3 months after Uriel's death.
A little girl. How do you forget a little girl?
According to court records, on November 1st, 2022, Kayla was going to get her hair done and asked her mom to babysit. Tracy met with friends for lunch, drove home, and forgot her granddaughter in the back seat with the windows rolled up. She went inside, talked to her dog, and practiced the piano. When one of her grandsons arrived, all of a sudden it came across her head that Uriel was in the back seat all afternoon. Her husband immediately began CPR. Temperatures in Wauchula that day reached 90 degrees. Uriel died. She was 7 months old. But less than a year earlier, 3 days before Christmas 2021, 16-month-old Ezra, Uriel's brother, also died while under his grandmother Tracy's care.
911, where is your emergency?
That's a little baby. The grandmother's out giving him CP. Is he breathing? No.
Okay, it was a pond,
Yeah.
and they're not sure how long the child was in the pond?
No.
The state attorney's office did not file any charges, telling us in cases involving the accidental drowning of a toddler, Florida appellate courts have stated that a one-time lapse of judgment would not establish culpable negligence of the caretaker.
Do you want your mother to spend any time in prison?
The mother in me, as I've said before, requires justice for my kid. The mother in me requires justice for my daughter. But there's a 5-year-old that lives in me still that doesn't want bad things for my mom.
So this mother lost 2 of her children because of her own mother. We just think about, let that sink in for a second. So when the jury didn't know about the first instance, the judge did. And it's the judge who's going to impose the sentence. Is that going to change things today? I want to bring in attorney John Phillips to talk about that. John, the judge always knows more than the jury in a lot of ways. And here, factually, the judge had more. Do you think that's going to impact the court's decision?
Look, I usually don't go personal here, but I pray it does. We represent Araya Page, and Araya Page was another little baby who was left in a hot car, and the justice system in Florida failed her just like they did this child. The standard on a hot car death is this extreme negligence, this not simple negligence. You know, in our case, at least they charged felony murder rule, which is on appeal. But, you know, this grandmother has lost 2 children and gotten, you know, the bare minimum of a conviction. And so this judge knows that. And while he can't sentence her for the first death of the child, he can certainly give her the maximum of the second loss.
Right, right. And you're right, John, you know, he can look at the other things in her life that are going to factor in here, even though, like you said, technically it's not a sentence on that. Tell me, and I appreciate, I think one of the things that's so great about you, John, you know, you can be a person too, not just a lawyer. You know, you're saying, look, like personally, this is how we feel, and appreciate that authenticity so much. With this next question, this is personal to the mother of those kids. So many of us here at Court TV, and we're trying not to pass any judgment, because I can't think of anything worse for this poor young woman than to lose both of her kids. My heart breaks for her. Many of us have been asking the question here, and it's a tough one: why leave the second child with your mom after the first instance? What do you think about that, John?
It's her mom. You know, she raised her. And you know, it's not just the mother, but the father. You know, to see, you know, a strong guy just break down tells you how horrible, how below every other loss that we can experience losing our children, particularly our young children, is for these families. And the line that I want people to hear from these victims is, how do you forget a baby when you're driving in a hot car? I've asked myself that question, you know, repeatedly. I've never left one of my kids in the car. I don't need a shoe. But people need to pay attention and not depend on car alarms and you know, reminders. You have a child in your custody, always assume they need your care.
Mm-hmm. Right, and I appreciate the reference you made there. I've heard people say, what you said, the shoe, take off one of your shoes, toss it in the back seat, so that when you go to step out of the car, you go, oh, well, let me open up the back door, and then there's the child. Gosh, this is just such a heartbreaker. John, quickly, because we're almost out of time, but what kind of a sentence do you think would be appropriate for this grandma?
Unfortunately, she's not going to get it. Again, Florida law is broken, and I want Florida legislators to pay attention to this. You have got to make these homicide cases, not based upon culpable neglect, but the criminal defense bar is ahead of us, victims' lawyers, with these cases, because they can testify that it was a mere accident. So whatever the maximum is, the maximum.
That's such great insight for us. John Phillips, you're awesome. Thank you so much for everything this morning. We'll see you next Thursday morning here on Opening Statements. My friends, that's all for this morning's episode. If you would like the show, watch it again, share it, tell your friends, go to courttv.com to do that. Click on that red shows tab right there.